All right, breaking overnight, the United Arab Emirates says they are dealing with incoming missiles at the hands of Iran. Saudi Arabia is calling for de-escalation across the region after the United States says Iran targeted 3 American guided missile destroyers as they transited the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. forces then hit a number of Iranian military facilities in response. President Trump says it is just a trifle and that the back and forth is just a love tap.
They trifled with us today. We blew them away. They trifled. I call that a trifle. I'll let you know when there's no ceasefire. You won't have to know. If there's no ceasefire, you're not going to have to know. You're just going to have to look at one big glow coming out of Iran. And they better sign their agreement fast.
With us now is Congressman Pete Aguilar from California. He's the third-ranking Democrat in the House. And Congressman, we did just get a bit of breaking news. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who's in Italy, says he expects a response from the Iranians today on whatever this current peace proposal is. Generally speaking, how much progress do you see?
You know, I think what the American people see is they see a war of choice. They see skyrocketing gas prices. They see a president who will go on TV and say whatever he needs to do to try to quell the crude market. They see rising costs that they're facing. 13 casualties through this war, hundreds more injured, billions of dollars have expended, and the administration has failed to articulate what their goals and objectives are. So that's what we see, and that's what the American people feel.
I should note gas prices ticked down a cent last night. They're still up over a quarter from last week, over 25 cents from last week,
and $1.50 since it started.
And $1.50 since the war began. But do you see progress? Do you feel as if it could be winding down?
It's hard to know because the administration says there's a ceasefire, yet we're still engaging in that. It's just their effort to evade oversight and accountability with the War Powers Act that Marco Rubio says is unconstitutional now, even though as a senator he felt a different way. So that's the difficulty that we see. It's tough to know what progress is because the administration hasn't articulated to the American people what the clear objectives and what the end game is. What does the president want to see out of this war? When will it end? When can we see relief? That's on the president, and he's failed to do that.
Oil prices are, there we go. You can see Brent crude up a tick. West Texas basically flat. This is after U.S. and Iranian forces exchanged fire yesterday. The UAE says it's dealing with incoming missiles. The oil, not a big move, frankly, with all the activity over the last 24 hours, indicating maybe the oil traders did not see it escalating further. With us now, CNN national and political analyst David Sanger. He's also a White House correspondent for the New York Times. Also here, former major staff director for the House Intelligence Committee, Michael Allen. David, I just want to start with you on the situation we've seen over the last 24 hours. We've seen U.S. strikes, right, on Iranian targets here and here in the Gulf. And we've seen, really, overnight, the UAE saying they're dealing with incoming missiles somewhere off the coast here. This doesn't feel much like a ceasefire with all the firing.
It sure doesn't. And, John, you heard the president last night say that it was just a trifle at one point. He said the U.S. response, which was somewhat vigorous when the Iranians attacked, understandably, was just a love tap. He is doing everything that he can to keep some kind of an agreement from going off the rails. And the reason's pretty clear. Not only is this now gone on for 10 weeks or so, but he leaves on Tuesday to go to China. And that trip has really been the bookmark for him for what he hoped would be the end of the war. He wanted to show up there, having vanquished the Iranians, gotten them to give up their nuclear program, and of course, reopen the strait, which supplies 30% or so of all the oil and gas flowing into to China. He's going to show up right now, at least on current evidence, unless things turn in the next few days, with none of that accomplished.
Look, Michael, let me just ask you, since David brought it up, the president is going to China on this visit. How do the Chinese view the United States and view this situation now? David's paper, the New York Times, had a great headline today, basically quoting a Chinese official saying they see the U.S. as a superpower with a limp.
Yeah, I think the Chinese are probably looking at us struggle a bit and are wondering what the United States' plan is to get out of this. You know, I agree with what David said. I think the president is going out of his way to make sure that hostilities don't resume in a large way. Of course, there's some that they define as under the threshold. But honestly, I don't see how the president gets Iran to even discuss meaningful compromises unless he holds out the credible use of force and restores the safe passage mission that successfully got 2 ships through the Straits earlier this week. It wasn't without cost, and it would still be a great risk, but it was the first direct attempt to negate the Iranian leverage that they have over us and the world by controlling the Straits. And I think ultimately that's going to be the only way out of this.
You know, David, Michael there is talking about this operation called Project Freedom, which was designed to get, vessels out of the Straits. A grand total of 2 were able to pass through there. But the costs seem to have been, and we're just learning this over the last 24 hours, David, a diplomatic rift with Saudi Arabia and with Kuwait, which didn't want any part of it. What does that tell you? Now, apparently, they're more amenable to the whole idea, but the fact that they didn't have them on board at the beginning, David, where does that leave things?
Well, the first thing it tells you is that the administration is having a hard time learning the lessons from even the beginning of this war. You'll remember that the Saudis and the UAE were not given notice about when the war was going to begin. And the next thing they knew, the Iranians were taking it out on them, right? Launching missiles at their sites and their bases and their oil fields or oil production facilities. So he started in on this Project Freedom, which, as Michael says, is a much needed effort to get this open, but again, didn't do full consultation, it appears, on what this would be, how they might all participate, certainly how they'd prepare for it. And all of a sudden, they pulled the plug on it. And the president came up with another excuse for halting it. Those 2 ships, just to put it in perspective, before the war, about 140 ships transited the Strait each day. Mm-hmm. So it tells you how little is getting out. And the president's in a position right now where I think he needs to show that he is somewhat in control of that strait, because as we heard from Secretary Rubio the other day, the situation that they're aiming for is getting back to making it a free international waterway, which means no tolls and no control by Iran.
Meanwhile, we're waiting to hear from Iran their response to this one-page peace plan. We'll see what they say, if they say anything, which would be telling as well. David Sanger, Michael Allen, great to see you both. Thank you.